Every leader knows that a thriving organization depends on the energy, productivity, and commitment of its people. But few leaders are able to cultivate the employee engagement and performance needed for this level of success. What's the difference? Positive leadership practices. Welcome to the Positive Leadership Movement Podcast with your host, positive work culture expert, Alex Bratty. Ready to harness the power of positive leadership? Let's dive right in.
Hello and welcome to episode 42 of the Positive Leadership Movement Podcast. I'm your host, Alex Bratty, and I'm feeling so privileged and honored today because we have a very special guest. His name is Dr. Nico Rose, and he is a rock star in the positive psychology world. He's laughing, but it's true, particularly in helping leaders and organizations apply positive psychology to the workplace. And of course, if you listen to the show, you know that that is also my area of passion. It's why I started this podcast. And so I feel like a kid in a candy store today because being able to talk with Dr. Nico and having him on to share his expertise with all of us is just so exciting. So let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Nico and his extremely impressive credentials. He is a professor of organizational psychology at the International School of Management in Dortmund, Germany. And from 2010 to 2018, he worked for Bertelsmann Europe's premier media corporation, most recently serving as their VP of Employer Branding and Talent Acquisition. Nico has studied general psychology at WWU Münster and obtained a doctorate in business sciences from EBS University, also in Germany. Additionally, he has completed the Masters of Applied Positive Psychology program at the University of Pennsylvania. Nico has authored 5 books, some 100 articles in professional magazines. He's a heavy metal fanatic. He lives in Hamm, Germany with his wife, 2 kids, and 2 cats. Welcome, Dr. Nico. It's so great to have you on the show.
Thanks for inviting me, Alex. Glad to be here.
It's just an honor to have you. So much to talk about with you because you have so much great, your own research, other knowledge and research that you've picked up along the way. So just to get us started, because I ask all our guests this question, and then we'll dive into your specific area. What does positive leadership mean to you, Nico?
I'd say my shortest definition is seeing more in people than they currently see in themselves, especially when you are leading those people.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. The other thing, I don't even know if that exists in the English language. It works better in German, but I always call it looking at other people with your good eye. You can look at people with your bad eye and seeing their constraints, or you can look at people with your good eye and seeing all the possibilities. And that's probably my shortest definition.
I love that. And it's not a completely direct translation, but it still works in English. And you make such a great point, right? It's like, that's what a positive leader does. I mean, they really look for the strengths, right? They're looking for the good. They're looking for the strengths. They're not ignoring the bad. They're not ignoring the weaknesses, but they're placing the emphasis on that and helping that person develop and grow and really leverage those strengths and all those qualities they have that are great. I love that. I love it. So you're very well known in the positive psychology world, particularly in Germany, in your home country. You've got 2 TED Talks out there that are just terrific. But tell me, what's it like to be a positive psychologist in a country that kind of takes pride in having a pessimistic and cautious outlook on things, that kind of German angst, if I'm allowed to say that we all kind of know. So what is it like?
So sometimes it feels a little bit like going against the grain because we're really, we're not super pessimistic as a country, but it's always about being cautious and planning ahead. We come from this engineering culture. That's why we probably build great cars, but it's always about planning and making up everything in advance, and not really being overly optimistic that things will sort out by themselves. So actually, when I started studying positive psychology, general psychology in Münster in 1998, I already heard about Martin Seligman, who's probably the founding figure of positive psychology. But he was just a footnote in the history of history of psychology 101, talking about his very early research on learned helplessness. And the whole thing of positive psychology hasn't really come over. It hasn't come over in the early 2000s. It hasn't really come over these days. There's people like me, 2 or 3 people who studied with Marty directly, but there's nowhere where you can really learn it at a university. It's just people like me trying to write books or blog and bring this stuff over to Germany. But still, I feel it doesn't really fit with the management culture. It doesn't really fit with the general culture. So it's still a little bit like being an outsider, which I like, because being a heavy metal fan in business and being a metal fan in high up places is also like being an outsider. And I sort of love being in that role. So.
Yeah, well, and it also puts you in that cutting edge role too, right? Because if it's still not that mainstream in Germany, then you're kind of out there with this, alternative way to try things. Like, hey guys, we've tried all that stuff, and, beating people over the head on like, you've got to do this and you've got to improve your weakness, and let's see where you're doing really badly at work so that you can spend the next year in misery trying to make that better. Here, how about we have this novel idea and look at what you're doing well and how you can grow your strengths, right? So you're kind of bringing that contrarian view in. And it puts you on the cutting edge, right? That's awesome.
Yeah, I've written this book, which is probably like a general introduction to positive organizational scholarship. And this came out pretty much a year ago, and it's probably only the 3rd book on that topic in German. We have some of the translations from English authors. So obviously we bring in Marty Seligman's book, but he's not really a business guy. He's coming from the clinical side.
Right.
We have people like Adam Grant. Adam Grant definitely gets translated in German. We have Angela Duckworth. But just in terms of a very good general introduction, mine is probably the 2nd or 3rd. And if I may say, the first one I really like. So.
Wow, that's amazing. And for our listeners, if you're not familiar, Angela Duckworth, her book is Grit. She's known for developing this whole concept of passion and perseverance. And Adam Grant is known for, I think his book is called Give and Take. And kind of looking at that whole notion of, does the nice guy finish last, or does he actually get ahead in the end, So two giants in positive psychology. And tell us, what is your book? What is the book that you have out?
Well, the translation to English would just be Making Work Better. And it's really an introduction to the general frameworks of positive organizational scholarship. So I talk about positive deviance a lot, which is based on Kim Cameron's thinking. Yeah. He's actually a real rock star. So I'm not the rock star. Kim Cameron is one of the rock stars. And then I use Marty Seligman's PERMA framework. So, the positive emotions, engagement, relationships, meaning, and accomplishment.
Yep.
Just show people some of the basic theory, some of the basic frameworks. But I also mix in some of my own experiences being a leader and trying to implement what I've learned at the university. So just me trying to use positive psychology for the best of my team. And I've also conducted, there was a German accent, conducted. So I conducted 33 interviews with lots of different people. Some of them are researchers. So Adam Grant and Angela, they are in my book, but I also conducted interviews with German CEOs, with chief human resources officers. So really trying to bring in theory, trying to bring in application of positive psychology in business, but also bringing in a lot of diverse viewpoints on this topic. And this came out a year ago. It's in German. I've tried to convince people to translate it to English, but it works the other way around. They bring the English authors, the American authors to Germany. The other way is much harder. So I'm still working on that.
Well, you never know. There could be somebody listening to this show that wants to help you with that. So I'm glad that you shared it. So tell me this. I mean, you had already studied psychology. You already got your doctorate in business sciences. I mean, what made you want to go back and get the Master's of Applied Positive Psychology at University of Pennsylvania? I mean, that's no small commitment, because if I recall correctly, you know, if you are outside, if you're not, you know, there, if you're not in the US, you have to travel, I think, once a month to actually be there in person. It's not, I mean, now it might be remote given our times, but up until now, you know, that's a big commitment. You'd have to fly in from Germany every so often and do that. And gee, you already, you know, had your doctorate. Why go back and get the master's? What really attracted you to that field?
That's a great question. So first of all, yes, it was one of the best years of my life. It also completely destroyed my body because of all the flying and the jet lag. And I was continuing to work full time. I was just thinking about having my wife having our second child. We were buying a house. So this was by far the hardest year of my life. And my body was completely destroyed afterwards, but my soul was very much full and happy. So I'm not regretting anything. The story behind it is, so after getting my degree in general psychology, I started working in the business world right away. I joined the German head office of L'Oreal, you know, the hairspray people.
Sure.
And this is also when I started to take a lot of courses in different kinds of coaching. And I was becoming a manager, but I was sort of missing working directly with people. When you are a manager, oftentimes you do stuff with people, or you manage whatever there is to manage. But I was missing working with people directly, one-on-one, in whatever way. So that's why I started doing all these different trainings in coaching. And then 2008, while getting my PhD, I actually started working as a coach for money, because I had to earn money, right? So doing a PhD takes 4 or 5 years. And I started in 2008 with my coaching practice. And then I just also, I love numbers. I love data. I love looking at things from a scientific angle. And so after about, I would say, the first 100 coaching sessions, I started to notice some similarities, some patterns in the things that people would bring to my office. So I was starting to detect patterns of what kept people from being happy, reaching their goals, whatever you want to call that.
Yep.
And that's when I kind of used my scientific skills to create a questionnaire. I wanted to know, can you sort of measure the presence of these roadblocks to success? Can you, I see these patterns in people, but can it be measured from an objective point of view? And I put that questionnaire on the internet, you know, on early LinkedIn and whatever. And I was really lucky because 1,000 people they answered the questionnaire, and there was some really good results and some really meaningful results. And I published that in a German coaching magazine. And then somebody approached me and said, you know, I've read your article. I like the description. I like those frameworks. Can you turn that into a book? And this is how I got to write my first book, all while doing my PhD. This had totally nothing to do with my PhD.
Wow, very cool.
So I started writing that book, and I wanted it to be all about my own research. But since I was, my PhD is not in psychology at all. It was in business sciences. So I had moved away from the world of psychology to some extent. So I wasn't really up to speed. And I started researching on my own stuff. And suddenly, I think when the book was probably 2/3 done, I stumbled on The How of Happiness by, what's her name, Sonia Lyman-Birsky.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And the first thing was, I was really disappointed because somehow I thought I had just invented this whole new field. And then I went to the back section of her book and I found out there's this whole field of research called positive psychology, which basically led to me rewriting the whole book to make it more, scientifically sound. But I was really glad I did that, because otherwise it was just about me and my whole tiny research. Yeah. And I wanted it to make really, so this first book is about my research, but I mixed a lot of the other scientific evidence in there. And pretty much when I was done writing the book, I stumbled upon, what's it called? It's Marty Seligman's book from 2000, Flourish.
Oh, Marty, yes. Wonderful book. Love it. One of my favorites.
Yeah. So, and Marty, he's also a good salesman. I think the first 3 or 4 chapters are really introductions to positive psychology. And the rest is, here's what I do with the army, here's what I do at Penn. And then probably chapter 8 or 9 is about the MAP program. So here's this super shiny program that I created with my associates.
Yes.
And I looked at that and I went to my wife and I said, if I ever want to go back to university, it has to be this. Yeah. And then I looked at the price tag and then I looked at, the flying in. Yeah. And I thought, well, it's good to have dreams.
Yeah.
So,
yes, it's not for the faint-hearted, the price tag and the flying. Yeah.
But then I had a really, really, really good, very well-meaning boss at Bertelsmann, and he knows that I love learning, and he knows that I love self-development. And we found an agreement where they basically paid for all that, which is a handshake. That's I didn't even have to sign a contract. If you go afterwards, you have to pay us back. It was just, like a handshake between men. And I mean, the truth is that the program, the fees are probably now at $60,000. And then you have all the flights and 50 hotel nights. And we just had a gentleman's agreement. And I did that. I kept on working full time. And I stayed for another 5 years afterwards, and I gave them back. So it was a wonderful experience.
What a great positive leader you had, though. Yeah. That he saw what you were engaged in, and he saw the value of it, and he wanted to help you develop that further. Because I'm sure you brought a lot of that back in to your work that you did with Bertelsmann's, right? So I mean. Yeah, what a smart guy. And also leading from that place of positive leadership that you described earlier, right? Like seeing the best in people and helping them grow and develop their strengths. That is a wonderful story. So tell us, how does what you've learned from all that positive psychology, how does it fit into what you now teach about leadership and also, working with organizations? Like, how do you apply all of that?
Well, looking at my last 3 or 4 years at Bertelsmann, because this is where I really got to apply and sort of try out most of the stuff. It was really me doing a lot of small experience with my team. I mean, I had a very close connection to these people, and the team pretty much stayed the same for most of the time. Mm-hmm. And we were very close. So they were very much open to my ideas. And sometimes I came back from Pennsylvania and I would go to the office jet lagged on next Monday. And I told them, I've learned something new. Can I try this out with you? I told them, you're my guinea pigs now. I'm learning all this stuff. And most of the time they actually said yes. They were very open to trying things out. Yeah. And this is how I sort of tried out and learned about what kind of tools work for me, what kind of tools work for the team. Mm-hmm. Remember, one of the very first things I did, because I was rather young back then, I was pretty new in the leadership role. Mm-hmm. And I always thought like getting a lot of feedback is probably the best thing that you can do to improve as a leader. We would have these, year-end talks and official appraisals, but this happens only like in half year and maybe at the end of the year. Yeah. I wanted to have constant, more or less daily feedback from them just to improve my performance as a leader. And so what I did is I asked my team to write me an email every second Friday. Email because we were mailing a lot anyway. It's really about not making a fuss about it. You don't have to download an app or something.
Right.
Emailing is something that you do organically anyway. So I want this to be the last thing before you leave the office on Friday afternoon, every second Friday. And I asked them for 3 things which are directly derived from positive psychology. So the first one was just a basic idea of their satisfaction. How were your 2 last weeks overall from 1 to 10? Just give me, not specifically about me and not about the work, just in general. And the interesting thing is not so much the difference between the people, but the differences over time within the people. I had one woman from America in my team, very positive, very engaged. So she was at a 9 always, and on good weeks she was 9.5, and on bad weeks she was 8. So if she had gone down to 7, that might have been something to look into. Right. And then I had rather German people on my team. They were at 6 all the time, and 6.5 was like super duper happy. But really, if somebody would show numbers below their own average for a couple of slots in a row, that was something where probably I should have looked into, and I did. So that was the first thing. Second thing was what went well. In positive psychology, you sometimes find these 3 good things exercise. So what are 3 good things that happened to you today, or you're meant to keep a gratitude journal? And in the business world, I just like to call that what went well. So I asked for 3 things that they were proud of or accomplishments. We were in recruiting. Have you recruited any really, really cool candidates that had already signed with Google, but then they didn't sign with Google, but with us? And
right.
I asked them to give that to me every second Friday. And actually what I did is, at least once I kept all these emails, and I kind of took all of their words at the end of the year and put that into one of these Wordo creators, and brought that to our Christmas dinner, which is just a very good way of showing the whole team, this is really what you care about. This is what made you proud, in a very concise manner in one of these word clouds. So I highly encourage people to do that.
I love that.
And the third question is also directly from positive psychology. It's really about, we call it make a wish. So if there's something that's bothering you right now about me, about your role, whatever keeps you from giving us your best performance or being happy, please tell it to me right now on this Friday. I want you to have this out of your head for the weekend. It's my duty as a leader to take care. And then I promise when I come back on Monday, the first thing I'll do is to try to make it better, to solve your problem or help you to solve your problem. And I told them when I introduced that, you're intelligent people, it has to be legal. It has to be on budget. So be smart about this. And I also told them probably there's some things that we won't be able to solve. We're in this large organization. There's corporate politics. There's bullshit going on, just like in every other company as well.
Yep.
But I would say, looking back, 75 to 80% of those issues we were able to solve pretty fast. And that was my way of being sort of maybe a servant leader. It's not really about telling you what to do. It's helping you to be at your best and putting away any roadblocks. And that was my thinking behind that.
Absolutely. And I mean, when you think about, so you were doing this every other week. I mean, wow, how many problems got solved just quickly, just in the course of doing, business. Whereas if you confine yourself to those, biannual or annual traditional reviews, all these, grievances can just like linger and fester, and then they become these huge problems that they never needed to be. And so,
Right.
I mean, I just love that you did the every other week check-in, but basically you were asking them about their general satisfaction. You were asking them to really look for what went well.
Right.
And then I love how you framed it, make a wish, because, we could just call that, what's your problem? Or what's your complaint, right? Like, here's the suggestion box, what's your complaint? But when it's not framed like that, it's what's your suggestion? So it's asking people, even within that question, that you can bring a complaint, but you need to have a constructive solution or idea, right? Because you're making a wish. So you have to tell me not just what the problem is that you're dealing with, but what you wish would happen to address that. So right there in that simple question, you're able to just shift people's mindsets around it, and also just how they're approaching it, right? Instead of just making the complaint, it's like, hey, you need to be part of the solution. So there's even an accountability piece built into that. I mean, it's like a lot of things in positive psychology, super simple, so effective, right? It's
Right.
almost like the more simple it is, the more effective it is, right?
I always believe that whatever you give people, it has to fit in organically with what they are doing anyway. There's all these apps out there and all these tools, but about cognitive load, whenever you give something new to people, that cognitive load kind of is subtracted from the value of that tool. So that's why I asked them to write me an email. If somebody's listening right now and you're doing Slack or whatever, use whatever the people are using already. If you're writing paper and pencil notes, do it by paper and pencil. Just make sure it's easy for the people.
That's a great point. Absolutely. Because you want to reduce any barrier to entry, right? You want people to actually do this. And I think also to that point, you made a terrific point when you talked about the satisfaction rating and being mindful of cultural differences. So you had an American woman on your team. When we look at the different countries, I mean, Americans in general are a little bit more predisposed to be focused on happiness. It's very much valued. People want happiness. We tend to be a fairly happy nation. But other nations and other cultures may not value happiness in the same way that it is in the US. So they may not have that predisposition to be like that lady was, floating somewhere between 8.5 and 9.5, right? And so having that cultural competence like you did, to be mindful of, hey, a 6 is basically a really good score for my German team members, whereas an 8.5 to 9.5 is where, my American team member is. And just being mindful of, okay, are they deviating from their norms, not just what I think the general average is, right? Because if you had lumped all of that together, your American would have been pushing up the average, right?
Right.
So just like that whole notion of being culturally competent in terms of being mindful of how people perceive happiness or satisfaction and where their baseline or their norming is around that. I think that's such an important piece in all of this.
Totally true. And you could actually see the same dynamic with the Make-A-Wish part. So the American, actually she's now my successor, so shout out to her. She was going there right away. I need this, I need that. And she was also giving me direct feedback on my leadership performance. So if I had said something insensitive or whatever during a meeting, she would tell me that right away through that tool. And later on, obviously, we connected really well and she would tell me directly. But I think especially in large companies where these hierarchies are still intact, you need to keep your door open so people can give you feedback. It's hard to give upward feedback. And if you don't encourage people, they won't give you that. And I saw the same thing with that other person. So she was giving me the satisfaction number. She was doing what went well. And then Make-A-Wish, no, it's fine. Said, okay. 2 weeks later, satisfaction, make wish. No. And after 3 or 4 times, I went to that person and said, I really mean it. So please use that. I'm being sincere. I want your feedback. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it's okay. So next week, satisfaction, what went well, make a wish, no. And this kept going on for like 3 or 4 months actually. Uh-huh. And then I encouraged her once more. And then the next time, actually, she said, and I'm not joking. This is true. I need a new pencil.
Baby steps. Celebrate progress. She asked for something.
Right. And I also think this was a test. This was a test to understand, does he really mean it? Is he sincere about what? Because, and 2 years later, we were talking about that episode, and then she sort of opened up. She had worked in another part of our very large company for 20 years. And she's worked for a leader most of the time where giving just a little bit of upward criticism would be like, you're dead, you're gone. So she learned that upward feedback is really, really, really dangerous. And that's why she kept refraining from giving any. Yep. And so this really, as you call it, the baby step, like I need a new pencil. Mm-hmm. I did that. I walked with her to the right room, to the right drawer, and this is where the pencils are. So here you are. And then she kept doing more and more of that. And then it probably took another 3 or 4 a month until she really came out with something that was a personal sort of feedback on my leadership performance, where she said, when we had the team meeting last week, you said something and I didn't really like your wording, or I don't know, probably I was being insensitive. I'm a male, so that happens. Mm-hmm. We don't always notice when we are insensitive, so it's really valuable. And from then on, she kept doing more and more in that, and I kept encouraging my team for about 2 years to write me these emails. I wasn't forcing them. I just asked them. It was an invitation. And then after about 2 years, they kept forgetting it more and more, but I think it was okay because by then the team was stable. We had this wonderful connection where I felt that people would come to me personally, either in a one-on-one or maybe even in our team meeting, but then sort of we didn't need it anymore. But without that tool and without the help of that tool, probably maybe we wouldn't have come to that point where we didn't need it anymore. So I still think it's very valuable, especially for young, inexperienced leaders, and especially in environments where there's not a lot of leadership feedback, right?
Yeah. Well, and what you're describing actually is that you, over that 2-year period, you created a culture of psychological safety. And so that's maybe why the email, the delivery of feedback via email wasn't needed anymore, because over time, people understood that this guy means what he says. He's authentic. When we ask for stuff, as long as it's, within reason, and we all understand there's constraints. I mean, like you said, there's the usual bullshit, there's things that I can't fix as one person in this organization, but there's a lot that I can handle for you. And you just proved over and over that that was possible and that you welcomed it. And so as people began to slowly trust that, then there's this psychological safety, and then they feel comfortable coming to you, close the door, have the conversation, or just like you said, in the team meeting in front of everybody saying, well, I don't know about this. Should we really be, how about we try something different? So it's wonderful. And to your point as well, like as a leader, to do that simple practice that you're describing, the email with the 3 questions, it builds that self-awareness. And, we know from so much research in leadership, right, that self-awareness is fundamental to being a good leader. If you are not aware of your own strengths, your own limitations, good luck leading anyone else, right? If you can't lead yourself, you can't lead others. And part of it's called self-awareness, but counterintuitively, a big part of it comes from other people holding up a mirror to us and telling us, you come across like this. And, I might think I'm coming across like ABC, but someone else sees me and says, nah, you're coming across as XYZ, and here's why. Wow, that's really helpful for me as a leader. That helps me understand if I'm, being overbearing, not paying attention enough. You mentioned insensitivity. I mean, some of these things that happen and, people will take offense or they cause a problem, but it was never intentional, but we don't realize because we don't have the self-awareness. So I think, what an amazing tool for both your team in creating that psychological safety, but also for you as a leader to help you develop and build that self-awareness and become a better leader. I mean, just talk about a win-win-win all the way around.
I think so. And actually, talking about constraints, also all this feedback that I received ultimately helped me to understand that I probably wanted to leave the corporate world around my 40th birthday, because I was already pretty much up there. So there wasn't so many steps to take, but I was always looking at the job of my boss. And he was the executive vice president of very important things. And he was talking to people all day long. He was in meetings, phone meetings, video meetings, real life meetings. And when you have a corporate career and you don't want your boss's job, you have a problem. And I was looking at what he did. The thing is, I love being in the presence of other people. I love to give workshops, and I love to be on the stage once in a while. But the truth is I'm rather introverted. I need a lot of alone time. I need a lot of time thinking about things, reading, and not being with people. And by giving my people back then a lot of leeway and a lot of responsibility, I could sort of manage my exposure and keep it down to maybe 4 or 5 hours per day. And then otherwise I could even craft some research, work on my books. And I got this feedback over and over that people sort of wanted even more exposure. You have to be there more for us and give us more appreciation. And at some point, it wasn't the only reason, but at some point I realized I'm probably not able to do this. This would be too much of a stretch for me, and it would probably make me a better leader, but at the same time, it would probably make me unhappy.
Yeah. And
this is one of the things that I had in my head, besides, seeing my kids a little more, getting out of the airplane and whatever. Really, this is probably the end of the line for me, is being a manager. I'm probably not, I can get better, but not in a good way, not in a way that fits me. And this is when I kind of took a little time off, and now I'm teaching at this business school. So I'm still having a lot of exposure with people. I can teach them what I've learned, but I get much more me time and time for writing. And it probably is something that I seek more in my life right now. Maybe it's different in 5 or 6 years, but I'm very happy with that decision. And that is also based on the feedback that people were giving me.
Yeah, I mean, that's and so valuable, right? If you hadn't had that self-awareness, you could have continued on, just the conventional wisdom career track. Like, I got to get the next job. I want the big title. I want the pay raise. I want the prestige, and not really stopping to consider, okay, what exactly is my role in that job? And is that something I actually want to do? I mean, just to have that mindful presence and understanding like what you need to do, what puts you in flow, and how you want to spend your days. That's so crucial. And actually I've had similar experiences in my own career where I've done it. I've gone and, followed the path and then realized, wow, like this is not the right fit for me, because I need to do this. I need to do that.
Right.
I need to create this kind of, work day for myself. So I love that. And actually I could go off and talk about that piece forever, but I really want to cover, because I know time's getting a little tight here, but I want to cover your karma framework. It's spelled CAARMA, because
Right.
this is a very cool tool. It's a framework that you developed, and it's a fascinating way for leaders to think about how they're approaching their work and running their organization. So can you share with us a little? I mean, you've already given us so much actionable content with the email and the 3 questions, but tell us about the karma framework too, so that people have some more tools from today's show.
Right. So actually, I didn't come up with this all by myself. This acronym is actually based on a research paper by a colleague of mine by the name of Michael Steger. He's at Colorado State University, and he's probably one of the 3 top-notch researchers right now in this world. Everything about finding meaning in your life, but especially also finding meaning in your work life. And a couple of years ago, he wrote this rather practice-friendly review paper. He just wanted to kind of succinctly cover all the different factors that have scientifically proven to influence people's presence in meaning in their work, especially with the focus on the question, what can leaders do to foster meaning with their people? And so this acronym really is in that paper, but then obviously this was a research paper. This was based on hundreds of other papers because it was a review. And so there were all these questionnaires out there to measure this tiny fraction and then measure this tiny fraction. And I was still being a manager back then. And my idea was, I really love this karma framework, and I can tell you about the meaning of the different parts in a second. But my first idea was, this is cool, this is memorable. Can you measure this presence of karma in a leader in a very succinct way? And that's how I came to do what I actually did in 2008. I developed a questionnaire and put it on the internet, and people fill it in. And there were some cool results again, and I published it in a German coaching magazine, and so history keeps repeating itself. But let's first tell people what it is. So the C is about providing clarity, telling people what are we here for? What is our purpose? What is the purpose of our team, of our department? How does this tie in with the mission of the overarching system, and so on? So that's very, very basic stuff. The first A is for authenticity, which is not, sometimes people think about authenticity like, here's me in my underpants, but this is not what I mean. It's basically about being authentic in your role as a leader. So have you kind of found out who you want to be as a leader? Have you thought about your values, about your tools, whatever? And then I think if you've managed this, people will perceive you as being authentic in that role. This is what I'm talking about. The second A is for, I call this actualization, which actually goes back to self-actualization. The full word would be support for self-actualization. This is really about recognizing strengths and important motives with the people that you lead, and then giving them the leeway to shape their role and shape their responsibilities so they can more play to their strengths. It's actually a lot about staying away from people so they can grow into whatever they do best.
Right.
The R is for respect. That's pretty much self-explaining. So being respectful, of being appreciative of people's contributions, but also helping people to respect them among each other and being appreciative. M is for mattering, which is really about helping people to connect their own contributions to the overall contributions of the system, of the organization. It's really about, okay, you're an accountant, but how does your role as an accountant help us to fulfill our company's purpose? Oftentimes, when people are in a silo, when they are in some department, they lose touch to that overarching purpose and to the overarching mission, and really helping your people to make that connection again and again is about mattering. And the last one is autonomy. So basically being the opposite of a micromanager. And all of these 6 facets have proven to foster the presence of meaning with the people. And I've created this questionnaire. It's 24 items. It's actually really short. Takes about 5 minutes. There's 4 items for each of those 6 facets of karma. And again, I put that on the internet, and I got a really great sample of 600 German middle managers and senior middle managers. And there's this really cool data on so what I did is I basically asked people for the impression of their manager. So how do you see your manager? How often does he provide clarity? How often do you perceive him as being authentic, and so on? And then I basically created 3 leadership quality groups. So I just looked at the people that loaded very high on those karma items, those people that were, somewhat average, and those people those were below average. And there's very, 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 very large correlations to the presence of meaning, job satisfaction, engagement, turnover intentions. So you can directly see the monetary impact of having a bad, because people are gone in no time. And now, about 3 years later, I tried to contact the people in the original sample again. I did that last summer. Unfortunately, I reached only a tiny fraction of this, and because I never wanted it to be like long-term, so I went to LinkedIn and other platforms to kind of find those people again. But here's the thing, I managed to locate 105 out of those originally 600 people.
That's not bad. 3 years later. Wow.
That's not bad. Email, I had email addresses, but then, they changed their employers and email addresses. But here's the thing, I had them take the test again. And what I could also see is, which is really important part, back then you were talking about turnover intentions, but it's only correlations. It's not causation, as we know. 3 years later, you can see it, and you can look at actual behavior. So how many people have actually stayed with their company? How many people have left the company? And then you can tie that back to the perceived leadership quality from 3 years ago. And again, you can see a very, very strong effect. So when people have felt that they were being led in a very good way according to these karma criteria 3 years ago, they were with very high probability still working for the same company. And the other way around, when they were led by a leader who they perceived to be bad, according to the karma criteria, they had found out another employer within the last 3 years with a very, very high probability. And as any HR person knows, that translates into a lot of money. Like you have to separate with the old people, you have to do HR marketing, employer branding, recruiting, you have to pay the headhunters, you have to do the onboarding. It takes up to 3 years until the new person is really up to speed. That's especially, we're talking about millions and millions and millions of dollars or euros. And it starts with, at least to a high degree, with leadership quality.
Absolutely.
And actually, the best thing here is, so I conducted this research in 2016 and I had the results. And then I reached out to Michael, who I'd never met before. And I said, I'm this little management guy from Germany. And I was really, I'm in love with your research. And I've done a little thingy with that. And would you be interested in seeing some of the results? And he said, yes. And I translated all that stuff. And then I was asked to write that article. The article is in German. Michael doesn't understand German. But again, I asked him, do you want to be my co-author? I really see this as being your work as well, because you brought this karma thing. I just took it and turned it into something else. Do you want to be my co-author? And he said yes, without understanding what's in the article. So again, a lot of trust on my part.
Yeah.
And he's the co-author with the follow-up article as well, which just came out 3 weeks ago.
I love it. I love it. And I mean, what an amazing tool to look at that. And as you said, I mean, just the impact and the cost of turnover, but also, you know, just when you have disengaged employees who actually stay, but they're not engaged in their work, right? I mean, that in the US alone, disengaged employees cost companies hundreds of billions of dollars, right? So
Right.
it's not just even turnover, it's the people who stay, but they're not actually really, you know, working and performing to their highest potential. They're just kind of there, right? So
Definitely.
there's so many
Right.
layers to that, how it impacts the bottom line. I absolutely love that. So this has been amazing. I mean, I could talk to you all day. Obviously, we can't do that, but thank you so much for joining us today, because you've given us not just you know, your wisdom and your knowledge, but you've given us like real practical and actionable tools. You know, I love the email every other week with the 3 questions, you know, just general satisfaction, what went well, and the make a wish. And this whole using the karma framework for people to actually get a snapshot of, you know, how is the leadership perceived, and what could be the impact of that. So I think you have a way to share that with people, right? And also, I know
Right.
our listeners are going to want more of you. So tell us, how can they get in touch with you, and also tell us about how they might be able to use this karma survey for themselves if they're not, you know, if they're English speaking, if they're not in Germany. How can they really leverage this amazing, cool tool that you created?
Right. So people can always reach out to me via LinkedIn. That's probably rather easy. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. I don't do TikTok, but that's something else. So LinkedIn, they can reach out to me via email. The easiest one is hello at nicorose.de. DE is for Germany. So that's basically just my name. No dot or anything. Hello at nicorose.de. I do have this homepage, but it's in German right now. I'm still working on an English translation. And if people want to use this karma questionnaire, I have created an English translation about 2 years ago. I have to be fair, it hasn't been tested. It's just the direct translation of the German items. I know the German items work really well. So if you look at it from a scientific point of view, you know, reliability, validity, and so on, it's really top notch. And I would probably guess that the English questionnaire works pretty much the same way. So if you are in HR and work in personal development, or even if you are a leader and you want to encourage your team to give feedback, I'm glad to share that English translation of the karma questionnaire. You can just use that. You can plug that into your tools. It's for free. I really do care about good leadership. And Michael and me, we had this discussion like, okay, it's this cool tool. Should we put a trademark on it? Mm-hmm. And I think we're both idealists in that way. We just want people to experience the best leadership that they can get. And that's why we said, you know, everybody can just have it and use it within their organizations. So reach out to me and I'll be glad to send that to you.
I love it. How generous. And I mean, you're so modest, you're so honest to tell us that it hasn't been tested. The English version hasn't been tested. At the same time though, it's done really well in its German version. And also, I mean, if you're a leader that isn't really measuring what's going on with leadership, I mean, hey, some measurement is better than no measurement
right.
At a very basic level, right? So, I mean, take Nico up on this offer. So email him at hello@nicorose.de if you want to get that English language version of the karma survey. 24 questions, have your people take it and check out the answers. So I love it. Okay. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. And thank you all for listening.
It was a pleasure.
Yeah, it's been terrific. And those of you who are listening, I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Certainly, we got so much value and wisdom from Dr. Nico Rose. thank you for joining me for another episode. If you have positive leadership stories to share, or you have questions on this week's topic, or you weren't able to grab a pen and jot down Nico's email address and you want to get connected to him, then all of that, just shoot me a note at questions@positiveleadershipmovement.com. I always love to hear from you. And as always, I want to thank you for being part of the positive leadership movement and inspiring me to do what I do every single day.
Make sure you subscribe to the show. If you like this episode, please rate and review. If you want to get more from Alex, check out Happiness at Work, where she provides leaders with a proven path to cultivate a positive work culture that increases performance, productivity, and profitability. Go to happinessatworknow.com. Join us next week and harness the power of positive leadership for your organization.